Okay. Good morning. Good morning. All right, let's take a look at the continuing along in the laws of Tsar Balei Chaim, the prohibition of inflicting pain on animals. We had said before that a person is obligated to help a situation where he sees an animal in pain, but he's not obligated to incur financial loss in the course of performing this mitzvah. But with that exception noted, if there is no loss of money, he's obligated to do whatever he can physically to help an animal be saved from pain. And that's even so if the animal is ownerless or if it's owned by a non-Jew. And let's take a look at the Imrei Yaakov over here, starting with Tes Zayin. Kol Bal Chai, you have to come to the aid of any creature, afilu kelev v'chatul. And this includes even dogs and cats. And he quotes from the Sefer Chasidim, which is the 12th century work, which talks about various different customs of the early Ashkenazi community. And the Sefer Chasidim writes, that people who pull on a cat's ears in order to hear the cry of a cat, I guess that was a thing to do before Netflix. You used to entertain yourself with playing with animals, and kids used to tie cat tails together and do all these kinds of naughty things. And the Sefer Chasidim says this is a sin. This is a wrong act. Why do you say even dogs and cats? In other words, the point is that when you're dealing with a beast of burden, that's when this halacha is most prevalent, like whipping an animal that you need to get to work. That's where there's an imperative to make sure that you don't inflict pain on the animal, or you save the animal from pain if it is involved in helping, in working. But even dogs and cats who aren't working, they're just roaming the streets, you have an obligation to make sure that they are alleviated of their pain. Aval shkatzim u'ramashim u'paroshim ozevuvim bahem leket tsar balei chayim v'shaper dami lemiktalinu medina. But now look what what he paskins. He says, but insects and crawling creatures, in other words, lower level organisms, flies, wasps, mosquitoes, all different types of bugs. There is no prohibition of tsar balei chayim, and you're allowed to kill these insects without incurring any penalty of tsar balei chayim. And if you take a look at the footnote over here, he points out that this is also from the Sefer Chasidim, and he quotes Sefer Chasidim saying that the Shnaim Hayu, that he knew of two people, Echad lahoya ratza lisrof hazavuvim, that one of them did not want to burn the flies. I guess there was an accumulation of flies, and the objective was to zap them, like we have these fly zappers, but he wanted one of them felt, no, we shouldn't be using fire to kill flies. Amar lo chavero al tihi tzadik harbe, and his friend said to him, don't be overly pious. This was a quote from the book of Koheles, that what mutav lisrof hazavuvim kedei shelo yiplu b'machal u'v'mishta v'yivlaim, because it's better to incinerate the flies, so that if, let's say, they're hanging around the kitchen, like I remember in my yeshiva, there was the big fly zapper, one of those big blue light machines that the flies, like every few seconds, you'd hear zzz, zzz. It was a very appetizing sound when you're in the yeshiva cafeteria. But anyway, so he said it's better to zap the flies than allow the flies to fall into the food and the drink, and then you would swallow them. V'yechta, and you would end up sinning. L'kach nemar al tihi tzadik harbe ad kan lashona. Therefore, it's better not to be overly pious. In other words, you have so much compassion on the insects. Well, what's going to be the end product from your compassion? The insects are going to be swarming all over the place. They'll eventually get in your food, despite, and let alone the discomfort that you'll experience by being swarmed by insects. And you'll end up committing an Isser Deoraisa of consuming bugs. So therefore, this is an illustration of where the prohibition of Tsar Balei Chaim does not apply to insects. And the second footnote, he writes, V'sham kasef hatam kaven she'enam b'nei malacha. And the reason why there's no issue of Tsar Balei Chaim is, again, because they are not beasts of burden. They're not capable of doing any kind of work, which really doesn't sound like a satisfactory answer. The kol shekain zuvim uparushim demeisi, and certainly when it comes to insects, which are gross. In other words, there's a human instinct to try and eliminate them from your purview. But then he quotes from another sefer, Uveshut Shuvas Vahanhagos Chelik Beis Simin Tavshin Chavav Kasav Tam Acher Kevin Shechiyusam Zuta. Another reason is that when it comes to very small and more basic organisms like insects, their life, the term he uses is Shechayutam Zuta. Their life is small, meaning that they don't have a very strong life force, and therefore there's no prohibition of snuffing out their life. I would say that there's a much more basic reason, and that has to do with the fact that they don't have, they don't experience pain in the same way that higher level organisms do. If a dog experiences pain, you can clearly see that the dog is experiencing pain. It yelps and it makes noises to express its pain. Insects do not, at face value, do not experience pain in the same way that higher level organisms do, and therefore there's no prohibition of Tsar Balei Chaim. Okay, so I wanted to point that out. Actually, I have to mention this to Rabbi Torchiner. I think at one of his halachas of the week was that the issue of Tsar Balei Chaim applies to insects as well, but you see from here that it really doesn't. And he says, but then he continues and he says, Afal pi shaha'ari hakadosh tziva letalmid of shelo laharog afilu kina. He says the Ari, Rav Yitzchak Luria, who was the great Kabbalist of the 16th century, once told his students that they shouldn't kill any organism, even a louse that was on their garment. He says, but zeh mimidas chasidus, but that's going above and beyond the law. In other words, yes, if you want to be a very, very holy and pious individual and not even kill the smallest organism, that's goes above and beyond the law. The alpi sodu dvarim begav mishum gilgul nogabo. And this was based on a Kabbalistic idea that people can sometimes be reincarnated as insects. That reincarnation was a big thing for the Ari. By the way, not everyone agrees with the Arizal that there is such a thing as reincarnation. There's a machlokus among great rabbis as to whether such a phenomenon is even real, because it's not documented in the Talmud in any place. It's not, the first place we see it documented is in Zoharic literature, in Kabbalistic literature, and so people like Maimonides, for example, denied the reality of reincarnation. Excuse me. And so, but among in Kabbalistic circles, reincarnation is a big deal. As a matter of fact, that's why has anyone ever heard of the mitzvah to eat fish over Shabbos? Have you heard that? That there's a special minhag to eat fish on Shabbos? So does anyone know why there's such a custom to eat fish on Shabbos? The Ari was of the opinion that very righteous people are reincarnated as fish. And for whatever reason, they have to come back into the world as different lower level organisms. And when they are consumed by righteous people on holy days, that creates a tikkun, some kind of rectification for the soul of the righteous person. And therefore their soul is able to be restored to its final resting place. And so the Ari felt that you're doing a service to righteous people who are reincarnated as fish. And the reason why specifically they're reincarnated as fish is because fish do not have to undergo the pain of ritual slaughter. In other words, fish don't experience pain when they die. You can just let them flop all over the place until they expire, or whack them over the head until they expire. And they don't experience the same kind of pain as higher level organisms. So it's the same idea, fish, and that's the reason why we eat fish on Shabbos, is because the Ari felt that tzaddikim are reincarnated as fish, and you want to elevate their neshamas by eating them specifically on a holy day, so you elevate them. Okay. I'm sure there are other reasons as well, but that's one of the reasons. Okay. In any event, there's no prohibition of tsar ba'alei chaim on lower level organisms. Okay. And then we said that you are allowed to ask for compensation if the animal is owned by someone, and you take the time to help the animal save it from its plight, and it takes time, you're allowed to ask for compensation. V'im eino nosing lo, afal pichein chayev lifrok mishum tsar ba'alei chaim, kid'lakamen sif ches ayin sham. And if the owner refuses to compensate you, you still have a mitzvah of saving an animal from tsar ba'alei chaim. So therefore, for example, if even a Gentile's animal buckling under its load, there may not be a formal mitzvah of prika, which is only for a fellow Jew, but there's still a mitzvah of saving an animal from tsar ba'alei chaim. And therefore, as we'll see later on, really, you're allowed to charge for that service. But if the person refuses to pay you, you still have to do prika. You may not be obligated to do te'ina if the person is not willing to pay you to reload the animal. But prika, the unloading, is what you have to do because of tsar ba'alei chaim. Now, she'asr min haTorah litza'er v'chulei, it is prohibited by the Torah to cause pain to an animal. And here we have the Imrei Yaakov quoting the Shilos Teshuvas Chassam Sofer. And the Chassam Sofer writes, "De'im eino tzarech lebanim lo mibaya de'eino mechuyev l'shaleach et ha'eim, ela achzorius nami avid l'tzar bal chayim b'chinam l'garish ha'eim me'al banea." The Chassam Sofer is addressing the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKein. How many of you have ever done the mitzvah of sending away the mother bird? Have you ever done that mitzvah? Izzy raised his hand. Izzy, did you enjoy the eggs afterwards?
No, we didn't eat them. We put them back. It was an awful experience.
So why did you send away the mother bird if you didn't want the eggs?
To do the mitzvah.
All right. So according to the Chassam Sofer, if you don't want the eggs, there's no mitzvah. And in addition to that, there's the problem of tsar ba'alei chaim, that you're causing.
It was awful.
It was awful. Why?
The pain. The mother was sitting. She flew over, landed on a fence, and she was watching us. I mean, there were about 6 or 7 of us doing it.
So did you wait until she flew away?
No, we chased her away, but she didn't go far.
Right. So actually, halachically, you have to wait until she can no longer see what you're doing before you can take the eggs. But the issue that the Chassam Sofer has is that there's actually no mitzvah of sending away the mother bird if you don't want the eggs. And he says, and not only that, he says, V'tzar Bali Chaim D'oraisa. And he says that Tzar Bali Chaim is a biblical law. Va'ayin Sham, and by the way, this is not well known by people, this Chasam Sofer, and I'll show it to you inside. I gave a whole shir on this one Monday night at the Sugya shir. Va'ayin Sham Decholik ala Chacham Tzvi, Desvirle De'ena Mechuyev Likach Habanim. He disagrees with Chacham Tzvi, who was his Rebbe, because the Chacham Tzvi feels that there is still a mitzvah to send away the mother bird, even if you don't want the eggs. The Chacham Tzvi holds that it's optional to take the eggs. The main mitzvah is to send away the mother bird. Now, why is there such a mitzvah? Why is there such a mitzvah if you don't want the eggs? So let me just show you this tshuva from the Chacham Tzvi, from the Chasam Sofer.
So when you do this, you have to have in mind that you want to do the mitzvah. Because a long time ago, I used to work with on a turkey farm collecting the eggs. We used to push they had special boxes for the turkeys to lay the eggs, and there was a spring-loaded door, and you'd push the bird out, pick up the turkey eggs, put them in a basket, and go on to the next one.
What do they do with?
I had no intention.
How come I've never seen turkey eggs for sale?
These are for breeder turkeys. So the job I had in the summers was artificially inseminating turkeys when I was at university.
Oh, that's not
for a few years. Oh yeah. Anyway, so what they do is they take the eggs, they candle them, make sure that they have a blood spot in them, fumigate, clean them off, fumigate them, and send them to the hatcheries. And that's how you get, and that's, if the eggs are too big or too small, you cull them out. It's a whole Torah going on over there.
How come people don't eat turkey eggs?
They do. What happens is when they get cut, they put them into buckets. They break them into buckets. A lot of people made a lot of money doing this. And then they'd sell the buckets to the bakeries. The bakeries would use it.
Bakeries use turkey?
They use whatever eggs they get buckets of mostly chicken eggs. But now back then, they used whatever you gave them. They used.
Are turkey eggs the same size as chicken eggs?
No, they're bigger. They're quite a bit bigger. Size and a half.
How come they don't sell these in the supermarket? Like, how come I never see turkey eggs for sale?
I don't know. I've never eaten one. It was interesting because, my dad was a chicken dealer. We only ate chicken eggs. We never ate turkey eggs.
All right. But anyway, by the way, there's no mitzvah of shiluach hakein for birds that don't fly.
Domestic?
It's only.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Sorry. The idea of Tzar Bal Chaim, is there, does a concept of dignity come in to help unload the donkey? Like, let's say you had a Rosh Hashiva walking the street and he saw the donkey.
Oh, that's a very good question. We'll have to see what the Rav Shulchan Aruch writes. Right? You want to argue that just like there's a mitzvah of dignity with Hashavas Aveda, that you can exempt yourself if it's beneath your dignity, maybe you can do the same by unloading the donkey. I don't know yet. We'll have to wait and see. Okay. But in the meantime, take a look at this tshuva from the Chasam Sofer. Chasam Sofer lives late 18th, early 19th century, and he writes, he's addressing a person who asked him a question, Al dati misha paga b'kain, ve'em yosheves al habanim b'yom Shabbos kodesh, imechayev b'shiluach afal gav d'mitaltel muktzah. He talks about the question that was raised to him, is there a mitzvah of sending away the mother bird on Shabbos? Is there a problem of muktzah? And so forth. So in the course of discussing this, he says, Techila nachkor b'masher kosav achabas yor b'tshuva, imechuyev l'shaleach afilu eino rotza lo be'in v'lo be'banim. The Chavos Yoyer, Rav Yoyer Bachrach of the 17th century, deliberates as to whether there's a mitzvah to send away the mother bird when you don't need the offspring. O dilma im yirtza likach habonim hisira Torah lo sikach im alabonim, aval im lo yirtza lo zeh v'lo zeh yanichem b'makomim. But when you don't want the mother, you don't want the offspring. In other words, you don't need them for food. Perhaps there's no mitzvah at all. Now, most people who have, when I'm called by someone who says they want to fulfill the mitzvah of shiluach hakein because they found a nest in their backyard, so they ask me how to do it, and they're not really familiar with this tshuva from the Chasam Sofer. So in the course of this tshuva, he writes as follows: Va'ayin Ramban b'nimukei chumash shelo. That if you take a look at the Ramban's commentary to Chumash on this mitzvah, Kasav al pi Rambam b'mor nevuchim v'kein kasav b'sefer hachinuch lahara'ah b'tam hamitzvah hahi, that the Ramban quotes the Rambam and the Sefer Hachinuch to try and explain the reason why God requires us to send away the mother bird. Shelo nit achzer la'akor eim albanim. And the reason is that we should not learn acts of cruelty, that we should not commit the cruel act of taking the offspring while the mother is right there looking at us. The afal gav the asr lomer al kansi por yagiu rachamecha v'hatam shelo higiu rachamav shel balei chayim. He says, even though the Mishnah in Maseches Brachos says that when you pray, you should not identify that the reason for this mitzvah is because God is merciful. He says, because kol shehu letzorech adam, d'imkein haya asr lishchot balei chayim. He says, because if we were to identify that the reason for the mitzvah, that God is merciful on birds, and that's why he tells us to send away the mother bird, then if that were true, that we have to always be compassionate to animals in that sense, then what right would we have to slaughter animals? So you see that there are limitations, and that's why when you pray, you're not supposed to mention that God is merciful by requiring us to send away the mother bird, because there's a certain lack of accuracy in that statement, because if that were the case, then God would command us not to slaughter animals for food. Ach, gezeros hein aleinu shelo nilmod lihit achzer unetaken midotenu ayin sham. But yet, there is still, even though you can't say that God gave us this mitzvah because he has compassion on birds, but God certainly gave us the mitzvah to help refine our own character. And so it's not so much out of God's concern for the birds, but it's out of concern that we will develop cruel characters if we wantonly grab eggs or little baby chicks from a bird's nest without caring about the feelings of the mother bird. V'hinei lefi ta'am zeh mevuar. He says, based on this, it's pretty clear the im einot tzarech lebanim, that if a person does not need the offspring of this bird, lo mibaya de'eno mechuyev l'shaleach ha'em, that not only is he not obligated to send away the mother bird, ela achzarius nami of it, but he's doing an act of cruelty in addition to that. Because basically the Talmud is essentially saying that it's cruel to send away to take the eggs in the presence of the mother. So therefore send away the mother bird, even though that's also cruel because she knows what's happening. She doesn't want to leave her nest because she's watching over the chicks or the eggs. But nevertheless, it's the lesser of two evils. You're at least sparing the mother having to watch a predatory organism, i.e. a human being, take away her children. So send her away. But if you don't need the eggs at all, why would you do the lesser cruel act of chasing her away? Adarabba nargil atzmenu ba'achzarius uletzar balei chayim. That if the whole function of this mitzvah is to train us to not be cruel and to refine our character, why then would a person go ahead and send away the mother when he doesn't need the eggs at all? That's only going to defeat the whole purpose of this mitzvah, which is to limit our cruelty. And by sending away the mother birds when you don't need the eggs, that in itself is an act of cruelty. Utsar Balechaim al Magain, I'm not sure what that word means. Legare Sha'eme al Baneha. So why would we chase away a mother bird, away from her children? Bitsar Balechaim de Oraisa. And we know that this mitzvah, this prohibition of inflicting pain on animals is a biblical law. Ela shekasav Ramban shel higiu racham bal Balechaim imhu litzarech ha'adam. The only thing that the Ramban acknowledges is that God's mercy on the bird does not extend to the point where we must deny ourselves benefit from the animal. If we can gain utility from the animal, then we are allowed to practice cruelty to animals, provided that we minimize the cruelty to the greatest degree as possible. And that's why, if you need the eggs, minimize the cruelty to the mother by sending her or shooing her away so that she doesn't see you take the eggs. You're minimizing the cruelty. But if there's no need for the eggs, then why do any act of cruelty at all? But if you don't need the eggs, then it is still a lesser cruelty, but a cruelty nonetheless, to chase away the mother. I'm going to skip the next paragraph because it's a little bit technical. And then he writes at the last paragraph, he quotes the Tshuvas Chavos Yair, which again was Rav Bachrach, who says, "Siyim tam b'shem sefer hazohar b'shiloach ha'em la'orer yayalelet ima ila'a al baneha." That there is a Kabbalistic reason to nonetheless send away the mother bird, even when you don't need the eggs. And why is that? Because a bird is a metaphor, a physical bird is a metaphor for the cooing bird in heaven. There's something called the Ima Ila'a, the higher mother. It's a manifestation of godliness. There's Abba and Ima in the Zoharic Godhead. There's mother and father. There's two different manifestations of God in the 10 Sephirotic emanation system. And one of them is considered to be the Ima, the higher mother. And the mother, which is a manifestation of God, is always crying over the children of Israel who are in exile. And by sending away the mother bird, you in kain mitzvah lahadir achar kain kidei laorer rachamei ima ila'a al baneha. By sending away the mother bird and causing the bird to mourn and cry over her offspring, you are triggering the divine mother to cry as well for the children of Israel. And according to that reason of the Chavos Yair, he says it's not a gratuitous act of cruelty. There is a utilitarian benefit on this Kabbalistic level, to garner some kind of divine mercy every time you send away the mother bird. This is because if we can justify in the infliction of cruelty to an animal for the sake of food, certainly we can do so for the sake of a mitzvah. But then the Chassam Sofer's conclusion is, but that is not the opinion of the Talmud. That he demonstrates that the Zohar's opinion of why to send away the mother bird is not the opinion of the Gemara, because according to the Zohar, the mitzvah, this idea only applies during times when the Jewish people are in exile. And yet our Talmud says that the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKain applies in all times and all places, including when the temple is standing, and the Jewish people are in a very good place, and there's no reason to arouse divine crying for the children of Israel. And so therefore the Chassam Sofer concludes that there's a dispute between the Talmud and the Zohar, and he writes, "V'yadua heicha de pligi hanigla imanistar ein lanu esuk b'nistaros v'haniglos lanu levaneinu." Whenever there's a machlokas between the Talmud and the Zohar, we always side with the Talmud, which is, by the way, that's a controversial statement in and of itself. But the Chassam Sofer is of the opinion that we should not engage in Kabbalistic or mystical matters, but rather just engage in the mitzvah as we understand it from the Torah Sheba'al Peh, from the Talmud. And therefore, his position stands that there's no mitzvah of Shiluach HaKain when you don't need the eggs. Okay? Did anyone have a comment before we break up? Izzy says,
I looked it up.
Turkeys take up more space and don't lay eggs as often. They also have to be raised for quite a bit longer before they begin to lay. This means that housing and feed-related expenses would be considerably higher for turkey eggs compared to eggs from chickens. Thank you for that, Izzy. You have educated us all. And now I understand why I have never had a turkey egg, at least not knowingly. But the mitzvah Shiluach HaKain, I don't believe applies to chickens or turkeys. And with that, I'm going to wish you all a good Shabbos, and look forward to seeing you soon. We'll see you, Mr. Shem, on Monday. Take care, everybody.